are these people?
Fuck Israel. Do you want to hit the theme song? Do we have a theme song this week for Fuck Israel? Hey, fuck Israel! All right. I debated whether to even show this video or not. It's pretty graphic. Journalist Mosab Abu Toha. I'm devastated. I wish I had never seen this video. I wish I never had to share it. This footage is from an airstrike on civilians walking down a street in Gaza City a few hours ago. On the right, two people lie motionless, heads split open. On the left, three others. One is dead beside his bicycle, while the other two writhe in panic, their hands flailing in terror. Inside a tent, one wants a simple charging station for phones. Two people are still clinging to life. This isn't war, this is terrorism. Again, I debated whether to bring this, but you know what? Israel's doing it, so we kind of need to show it, I feel like. This is what our bombs and weapons are doing, everyone. Yeah, we'll probably get this blocked out for showing some graphic stuff, but I think it's important for people to see. We are responsible for this, in part. We are responsible for this. Aalia Mauro says Israel is slaughtering Palestinians in Gaza right now. Israeli forces are pushing into Gaza City, advancing through Zaytun and Jabalia, with 60,000 more troops mobilized. 60,000! Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are being driven from their homes under siege, with no escape, no food, and no safety. This is a mass slaughter of a trapped and starving people. Fucking horrible. Fuck Israel.
Yep.
All right. So I got this article out of Jason Hickel, who asks the obvious and silly question, why does the U.S. support Israel's crimes? Well, it's because we're implicated, but it's still a really silly question that seems obvious. Why does the U.S. support Israel's genocidal crimes against the Palestinian people, even in the face of overwhelming international condemnation, at massive expense, and to the point of totally debasing the very frameworks of human rights and international law that it pretends to uphold? Like, everything that we claim that we believe in is being thrown to the wolves here. People fall back on narratives about the power of AIPAC in U.S. elections and other forms of Israeli political interventions in the U.S., like Beitar and like Zionists of America. That's a J Street. That's a real force and can't be ignored, but the reality is that the U.S. ruling class broadly supports Israel's actions with bipartisan consensus because they see this as aligned with the interests of U.S. capitalism. And
capitalism.
Right, and most other Western governments, Britain, Germany, etc., hold the same position for much the same reason. The important thing to understand is that the capitalist economy is a world system where growth and accumulation in the imperial core, e.g. U.S. and Western Europe, relies heavily on the appropriation of cheap labor and resources from the periphery and semi-periphery, or the global south. Western states and firms need southern states to remain subordinated suppliers of cheap labor, raw materials, and consumer goods within global commodity chains. And not just global south in the West, in South America, but also in Africa, in Australia, in China, in India, in Indonesia,
China,
in Taiwan, in the Philippines. In order to maintain this arrangement, the core states, well, that's South America, right? The core states must find ways to suppress sovereign economic development in the South. Oh, Brazil, Argentina. Sovereign development means Southerners begin to escape their subordination, produce more for themselves, increase their wages, and consume their own output. Evo Morales was all about that. This makes resources and inputs more expensive for the core, which constrains their consumption and makes it more difficult for them to realize profits. Hit me with a Ferengi thing, because that's what this is all about. Fucking straight up greed.
Okay.
For the wealthiest motherfuckers on the planet already.
And a Ferengi without profit.
It's no Ferengi at all.
An American without profit apparently is no American at all either. This is the key point.
Yep.
Economic sovereignty in the periphery threatens capital accumulation in the core. To avoid this, the core states must constantly intervene to prevent or crush any movement or government in the periphery that seeks national liberation and economic sovereignty. When you start looking at it through that lens, things make a lot more sense, let me tell you. The U.S. started to support the Zionist project in the 1960s because they saw this as a way to have a military proxy in the Middle East where they could stage counter-revolutionary interventions against the Arab social movements and national liberation struggles that were gaining traction at the time. The U.S. could not accept the prospect of sovereign development. Go ahead.
There was a general, right? What was the general? He said, we're going to go, he got a paper on his desk, we're going to go bomb 7 countries.
Well, that was Wesley Clark in 2001.
That was it.
2002. But he's talking about in the 60s that the U.S. couldn't accept the prospect of a sovereign development in the region. The liberation movements had to be crushed or destabilized, and they used Israel to help them do it, even back in the 60s. Israel has been instrumental in assassinating liberation leaders in the Arab region and interfering in the political processes of the Arab countries to prevent nationalist and socialist parties from coming to power. They want to keep that in the religious kind of dictatorships. That's what they prefer. All right. So where do we go? I lost my spot. It has a long history of attacking the regional states. I clicked the wrong button. The regional states: Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Yemen, etc. Half of them are being bombed right now, destabilizing them and forcing them to divert resources toward defensive spending instead of industrial development. On top of the fact that they take out the infrastructure and they're forced to pay to rebuild that. This is in full alignment with U.S. strategy. Not only in the Middle East, Israel has a long history of providing military and intelligence support to right-wing regimes around the world. For example, Israel armed and supported Argentina's U.S.-backed military junta, which murdered 30,000 socialists and political dissidents. Yes, we did that too. And Israel armed and assisted the U.S.-backed genocide in Guatemala, training military cadres in techniques of torture and ethnic cleansing. They train our cops too. The U.S. supports Israel for the exact same reasons that they've backed the plotters of assassinations and coups against liberation leaders across the global south since the 50s, which deposed Mossadegh in Iran and Lumumba in Democratic Republic of Congo, and Nkrumah in Ghana, Allende in Chile, and Arbenz in Guatemala, and on and on and on. They do it for the same reason they invaded Vietnam, destroyed Libya, and imposed sanctions on Cuba. It's the same pattern with the same objectives. Again, start looking at it through that lens, it becomes very clear. This is why, one reason why Israel is so despised around the world. Not only because they're hell-bent on ethnically cleansing Palestine, but because they intervene everywhere to crush popular movements and create chaos and instability, and this is intolerable. Again, that's in partnership with the United States. But yes. So Israel is not an ally of the U.S. in the conventional sense of the term. It's a proxy force, an attack dog, a partner. This relationship is particularly useful to the U.S. because it allows them to have a degree of distance from their actions and plausible deniability. The U.S. can send weapons to Israel and directly coordinate military strategy with them, then claim it's not responsible for the violence and destruction and war crimes that Israel perpetrates in the region. Literally exactly what we just saw in Gaza City. We gave them those weapons. We sold them those weapons. Help the military plan. We were doing the spy flights. We showed the spy flights last week. That there was a private U.S. outfit that's running Beechcraft spy flights over Khan Yunis on behalf of the British government. The core states use South Africa in the same way. The key reason that Western powers supported the apartheid regime in South Africa, also against overwhelming international condemnation, was because it served as a highly militarized Western colonial outpost that was geared to run up against counterinsurgency operations, not only within South Africa against the ANC and Communist Party. Remember, the U.S. listed Mandela as a terrorist until 2008, but also in Angola, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Namibia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, etc., causing immense violence and chaos. Yes, we destabilize a region by supporting the monsters within it. The vast majority of the world and international law itself supports Palestinian liberation, but the U.S. and its main allies reject this. Why? Because Palestinian liberation would remove a key U.S. proxy and would open the way to liberation movements elsewhere in the region. That's probably the scarier thing. A liberated Palestine means a liberated Middle East, and a liberated Middle East at the hinge of Africa and Asia and Europe is strongly antithetical to the interests of Western capitalism. Right? That's, again...
Capitalism.
Yes, sir. That's correct. We're protecting capital. That's all we do here. So this is the situation we're in. The Western ruling classes are willing to back obscene violence in Gaza and shred the liberal values they claim to believe in, resulting in the breathtaking displays of hypocrisy, because they want to maintain the conditions for capital accumulation and geopolitical hegemony. This is U.S. policy.
The conditions that the conditions were in.
Yeah, oh yeah. All the hand-wringing by Biden in the previous administration, the discourse about too many innocent lives lost, was all theater designed to diffuse our outrage. Under Trump, the veneer of concern is just gone. Miriam Adelson bought that concern away. You cannot appeal.
Yeah.
You cannot appeal to imperial power in moral terms. The only way the U.S. will stop arming, funding, and propping up the Zionist regime is when it becomes too costly for them to do so. This will come down to the strength of regional political and military opposition, of which, again, we read in the last articles about Ukraine. They were trying to weaken Russia because they are one of the largest political and military oppositions to this. Maybe. Potentially. But they also go along with Zionism in Israel quite often. And Lubavitcher Chabad.
Quite often.
The strength of the Hague Group.
They have entire fucking rabbis in the fucking Azov.
Well, I'm talking about Russia too. But
yeah.
The strength of the Hague Group and the movement for boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. The strength of punitive measures that can be applied by international courts, except Israel and the U.S. doesn't acknowledge those and is sanctioning them now. All right, so fuck Israel for all of that, for helping the U.S. and CIA destabilize governments. I had two other things, one of which, Jesus, a lot of people have written about this and blame Laura Loomer for this nonsense and calling attention to this. But it wasn't Laura Loomer. It wasn't Laura Loomer that made the decision to block this aid. That was the Trump administration and Stephen Miller and whoever the hell else did it. The Trump admin's halt on medical evacuations from Gaza is a death sentence for Palestinian children. Caitlin Johnstone wrote an article about this. The best way for an injured Palestinian child to get out of Gaza at this point is to mask themselves as an American pedo. All right.
Sure.
The Trump admin's decision
Might
to
even
halt,
be their destiny, if
Right.
you will. Heyo.
Heyo. Or a friend named Tracy, or somebody named, or a friend named Tracy, maybe. But the Trump administration's decision to
He's
halt
gonna hate this segment.
all visitor visas for Palestinians from Gaza, which came after pressure from far right-wing activists, will be a death sentence for children who require life-saving medical treatment. And they've been bringing Palestinian kids here to get treatment, which is the least we can fucking do after providing the weapons and arming and funding the people that did this to them. Right?
Fucking cunts.
Fucking cunts. The U.S. State Department's decision this weekend to halt all visitor visas for people from Gaza, which includes the medical humanitarian visas that have brought injured children to American hospitals, will cost Palestinian lives, of which the State Department does not give a flying fuck. Officials say this process will be subject to a full and thorough review. For a child with infected burns or a deep trauma wound, a pause is a verdict on their life. The freeze did not arise from new intelligence or any novel identification of problems in the temporary visa pathway. It occurred via a social media panic with the circulation of mischaracterized videos of injured children arriving under the care of a U.S. nonprofit being labeled as a security threat, rhetoric amplified by political allies like Marco Rubio. The State Department then announced it was stopping visas while it re-examines procedures, because heaven forbid they came over with their parents and they weren't separated permanently. Because, you know, they don't allow them to ever go back because there's no right of return. The racism and misinformation at the heart of that panic deserve naming. Some have labeled the process of evacuating children with amputations and burns as potentially being linked to terrorism, and even characterized their joyful cries as jihadi chants. That's textbook dehumanization. I don't want to hear George Bush.
Terror. For terrorism.
Take a population, fuck him. Take a population of wounded kids and code them as a...
I got 26 seconds of Bush.
That's right,
terror,
fuck him.
All right?
Fuck him, he's a fucking cunt too. All right?
Thank you all.
Take a population of wounded kids and code them as a threat to justify exclusion. Many have commented on the chain reaction from such posts in the administrative action. The line from a viral smear to a federal policy that blocks chemotherapy, skin grafts, or prosthetics for children should shame us and the speed with which it occurred. It also wildly, go figure, overstates the scale of what's actually happened. Of course it did, because that fucking cunt is a hysterical lunatic. In total, many of the NGOs running these U.S. transfers report a few dozen total children to date, not a flood. Individual city stories have been about 2s and 3s, a pair treated in Dallas, several children welcomed in Boston. This is the opposite of a large-scale pipeline. It's a narrow, highly vetted corridor that exists, because Gaza's health system has been shattered. Of course it has, intentionally. To understand how few make it here, you have to understand the pathway that these people are on. First, a physician in Gaza refers a child for care that no longer exists at home. The case goes to a Ministry of Health committee, then to the WHO for medical triage. Only after receiving hospital issues a formal acceptance, often after weeks of back and forth with surgeons, translated records, and imaging, does the family usually even begin the paper chase. Passports, exit permissions from the Israeli military's coordinator for government activities in the territories. Yeah, the Gestapo. Jordanian clearances when the bridge route is used, U.S. visa appointments, and finally, a WHO-escorted convoy. Each step is a separate queue with its own failures and reversals. A single "not yet" in any queue can kill the case. Like, the stars need to align. I would call this unicorn jumping on a rainbow and landing in a pot of gold, is literally how these kids made it here. And now they just closed that door too. The numbers give us a picture of why this corridor matters. According to WHO and OCHA, as of mid-August, more than 14,800 people in Gaza need urgent medical evacuation outside the Strip. Right now! Since October 2023, about 7,560 patients, okay, including more than 5,200 children, have been medically evacuated abroad, with most of those transfers occurring before Israel's closure of Rafah last year, which made departures far rarer and slower. In fact, a 92% decrease was recorded in successful evacuations thereafter. So they basically halted them. Most of these evacuations happened prior to the closure of the Rafah Gate. You mean the blowing up of the Rafah Gate?
Rafah Gate.
On August 13th, the WHO...
Like 18th closing.
Right? The WHO managed to move 38 patients, 32 of them children, to care options in Belgium, Italy, and Turkey. Not even here. Such operations are far smaller, of course, than the need. Causing the U.S. share of that global effort may look like a minor adjustment from Washington, yet for an injured child in Gaza, it reads as a door slammed shut and probably a death sentence. Because if it was bad enough that they had to be taken here, knowing everybody that's there and still suffering, it's probably pretty fucking bad. American hospitals have long accepted international charity cases. Pediatric centers have taken on many cases from around the world because these are areas where some U.S. teams are among the best in the world and where outcomes can be life-changing and transformative. Except that Israel doesn't want these people's lives to be changed and transformed. They want them dead, right down to a baby. We see these genocidal lunatics talking about it on TV daily. Just go to Twitter and look it up. You can see them. They don't make it a secret. What happens is the Western press tries to whitewash this bullshit and act like this isn't really happening because they know nobody would actually support this nonsense. Now, it's only anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia that are preventing U.S. hospitals from playing a similar role with children from Gaza. Other countries and regions have been accepting far more cases than the U.S. Just like the refugees that they've been accepting from Palestine. And Gaza, West Bank, we take nobody. Since October 2023, the top 5 referral destinations have been Egypt, the UAE, Qatar, Turkey, and EU countries. How come those Arab states won't take their own in? Remember, that's the narrative that comes in by the Zionists. Well, Egypt, the UAE, Qatar, are Arab nations, aren't they? The cases include children with trauma wounds, patients with cancer, congenital anomalies, cardiovascular issues, and even ophthalmology-related needs. Because you don't have any freaking eye testing equipment anywhere left in Gaza at this point. They blew it all up. The pathway is, in fact, fraught with ethical dilemmas. Children are frequently separated from their caregivers or loved ones. Families are separated or torn apart, as some relatives are denied exit approval, often the men, by Israel, leaving others to stay behind. Also, so they can potentially threaten or torture those people if those people are not returned or monitored or whatever it is that Israel wants. We've met such families and children who've come to the U.S., have heard from their stories and the trauma they've endured, the physical scars and the psychological ones, and the ones that can't even be named. What should happen now is simple. First, immediately reinstate the processing of medical humanitarian visas for children and their companions. Second, we should push towards affirming the right of return for these children. Many families fear never being able to return to Gaza after accepting treatment abroad, with some even choosing to stay in Gaza out of such fears. Third, restoration of medical corridors for Palestinian patients in Gaza to occupied East Jerusalem and the wider occupied West Bank, so that they do not need to leave their country and homeland just for treatment if it is available. Of course, Israel will never allow that. Finally, stop letting demagogues dictate whether a Palestinian child gets to live. The moral bar here is not too high, but apparently that's too high for the U.S. and Israel. How sad that the government in Washington can be spurred by a bad faith tweet to close a lifeline for children. Any shred of decency as Americans should compel us to reopen it. Fuck Israel. Support Mondoweiss for writing that article. All right. Indie Media Award honoree. They're one of the best outlets that report on Palestine regularly. All right. This was Bilal, Irfan,
free Palestine,
and Alyssa Seliga. Okay. This was also another really important story that I wanted to get into. Looks like we're probably not going to have a chance to get to some of this stuff. Wow, we didn't get to London or Venezuela yet. This would be a long show, or I don't know. Maybe we'll pick it up tomorrow night.
Whatever.
Reuters journalists accusing the newswire, their own company, of pro-Israel bias? Yeah, how about that? All right, so this comes out of another Indie Media Award honoree, Declassified UK. They've restaffed and they're doing some great work right now. And they have an exclusive here. Insiders at the world's largest news agency reveal their battles with management over covering Palestine. I don't know how much they've even really battled, but they've actually gone public with it. So that tells me that it's been an issue. So it says that when Israel assassinated Palestinian journalist Anas al-Sharif earlier this month, and again, we covered that on the show with his colleagues, the Reuters news agency ran a report titled, "Israel Kills Al Jazeera Journalist It Says Was Hamas Leader," which it wasn't. They chose that headline despite the fact that al-Sharif used to work for them. He was part of a Reuters team that won a 2024 Pulitzer. Instances like this caused a backlash online, but also sparked concern among some staff at the influential global newswire, which was founded in London in 1851 and now has a daily audience of more than 1 billion people. The biggest disseminator of propaganda worldwide. Multiple Reuters employees have spoken to Declassified about what they see as pro-Israel bias among the company's editors and management. Yeah, I would say so. All requested anonymity to avoid reprisals. Again, no surprise. Another, a desk editor, resigned around August 2024, telling colleagues in an email, quote, "Through covering what we call the Israel-Hamas war, I've realized that my values don't allow with those of the company." In the email, they also said, quote, "I've attached a report, an open letter some colleagues and I sent to management in the hopes that Reuters will uphold some basic journalistic principles, but I now recognize that senior leadership is unlikely to change, much less stop actively stifling critiques." Heather Carpenter, a senior director of communications at Reuters, declined to declassify that the company ever received this letter. Of course they did. Plausible deniability. However, a Reuters source told Declassified, quote, "A few weeks after the October 7th attack, several journalists at Reuters recognized that our coverage of the Israel-Gaza war lacked objectivity. In response, a group of journalists, while working full-time, undertook a comprehensive internal investigation, conducting both quantitative and qualitative analysis of our reporting. The findings formed the basis of an open letter, which was shared internally to identify and connect journalists within the newsroom who were committed to strengthening Reuters journalism on Gaza. Their internal study, seen by Declassified, can't deny this, analyzed 499 reports tagged as Israel-Palestine, published between October 7th and November 14th, 2023. They found, and this is going to shock you, I know, a consistent pattern of assigning more resources to covering stories affecting Israelis as opposed to Palestinians. At the time of their announcement. And remember that Israel has also murdered Reuters journalists in Lebanon. At the time of their analysis, or maybe it was Syria, over 11 or both, over 11,000 Palestinians in Gaza had been reportedly killed, around 10 times the number of Israeli fatalities. The latest
a lot of stuff happens that the news won't tell you.
And that they knew that they were innocent civilians. The latest death toll as per the Gaza Ministry of Health is nearly 62,000. The actual numbers are expected to be about 3 times higher, at least. They further question why Reuters had not reported more on claims by experts that Israel was committing genocide in Gaza, contrasting it with how the newswire approached such allegations about Russia's conduct in Ukraine. Its authors also complained that one clear-cut example of how our wording implies bias is in our choice to prohibit the use of the word Palestine. While Palestine might not be recognized as a state in some Western countries, we don't need to pretend that it's not a real place. Reuters management did not respond to Declassified's questions about whether any recommendations from the internal study had been accepted. Why does that not surprise me? Again, here is some of the stuff that they had recommended. Right? By May of this year, however, there were some signs of changes to the style guide, which reflected the earlier internal criticism. Reuters Global News Desk's editor for quality and style, Howard S. Gohler, sent an email with subject Reuters style update on the conflict in the Middle East. Again, whitewashing it right there by not calling it a massacre. Nobody is firing back at Israel at this point. The update allows Reuters journalists to use the word genocide with attribution, but still limits the term Palestine for references to historic Palestine from antiquity to 1948. You can't call it occupied Palestine. Even with the looser restrictions on the term genocide, Declassified's analysis found that Reuters went on to use the word in just 14 of 300 reports on its quote-unquote Israel and Hamas at war page between June 21st and August 7th. And there it is charted out. Just how few times the word genocide is mentioned versus not mentioned out of 300 articles. Not mentioned in 286 of them. Terms such as war, campaign, conflict, escalation, and assault were commonly used instead. When genocide was mentioned, it's nearly always with Israel's denial, a practice not afforded to other belligerents such as UAE-backed rapid support forces in Sudan or Russia. The double standard in the coverage of the Gaza genocide and other crimes against humanity, and it's not just Reuters, it's been New York Times and the Associated Press and the Telegraph and the Daily Wire and Daily everything. Or a Daily Caller. It's been flagged by the internal staff in the above-mentioned study. Okay, Dr. Asal Rad, big fan of hers, scholar of Middle East history, known as the headline fixer on social media, told Declassified, quote, the pattern you note is essentially genocide denial. She added that Reuters frames Israel's atrocities in Gaza as part of an ongoing war military campaign, rather than calling it a genocide, despite the consensus among human rights experts and international institutions that have concluded Israel is committing a genocide. But yet, these are the descriptions. Usually they call it war or military campaign. The email quoted sections of from the style guide titled Gaza War 2023 to present and broader context, which provide details primarily from Israel's perspective. Go figure. The updated sections seen by Declassified do not mention crucial details such as the role of the U.S. and Israel in sabotaging ceasefire negotiations. They completely omit Israel's illegal settler colonialism and apartheid and significantly underreport on the extent of destruction in Palestine. For example, the May 27th handbook update fails to cite the Lancet's findings that it's not implausible to estimate that up to 186,000 or even more deaths could be attributable to the current conflict in Gaza. All right. The update also neglects the fact that Gaza has become the deadliest conflict zone for journalists since the U.S. Civil War in 1861. Over 230 of them so far. Last year in August, former UN human rights lawyer Craig Mockber wrote for Mondoweiss after he resigned from the UN over this, quote, "It's simply not credible to suggest that Western media companies are not aware of the realities on the ground and of what they're doing to obscure them. They have indisputably made conscious choices to hide the genocide from their audiences, to systematically dehumanize the Palestinian victims, and to insulate the Israeli perpetrators from accountability." Why? More recently, in May, writing for Haaretz, Israeli journalist Gideon Levy said, quote, "A courageous, decent media scene could have prevented this military operation, but we barely have anything like that." A Reuters spokesperson told Declassified they believe their coverage has been fair and impartial, in keeping with the Thomson Reuters trust principles. As long as that means defense of Israel, sure. All right. As in many newsrooms, our coverage of the war has come under close scrutiny, including by our own journalists, and we've faced feedback from multiple places. Sounds like a lot of bullshit to me. So fuck Israel, fuck Reuters and the newswire services, Reuters and the Associated Press, corporate media that republishes this nonsense uncritically and without edit on a regular basis. I have been calling this out for years. These wire services push CIA and State Department propaganda almost daily. And it's the fastest way for propaganda to be pushed globally across every major media outlet that most people consider to be credible. We know for a fact that they are not credible and that they've been taken over and serve corporate interests and the wealthy, but most people have not figured that out yet. All right. Fuck Israel again. Cunts. I don't know what we're up to, Kieran, but the cunt counter should be up there. So we're not going to get remonetized by YouTube for that. It's almost 11:30. Wow. Been ranting for an hour and a half about Ukraine and just Israel. We still have the crap that's going on in London, people getting arrested. All right. And then we can talk about Venezuela. Venezuela is a long segment. Again, I may want to come back tomorrow night. If you're able to, and it means, please fund the media you want to see. The ways to do that are with Cash App, $ Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, at paypal.me/Indie News Network, over at indienewsnow.com, where you can click on Keep the Media Free. And then we've got the indiemediatoday.com Substack, where we're still live right now. Hi to everybody over there. Aaron Paul Against Genocide. How are you, man? Thanks for subscribing. Free subscriber over there. We really appreciate those too. Go follow Aaron Paul Against Genocide over on Substack. Also at iodnewsletter.com. That's for the network. So by all means, go check that out. Go sign up and go connect with everyone that supports fuck Israel, that movement for sure. Love you all. Thank you so much for everybody who's here tonight. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. I truly believe that. And we'll see you soon. I love you all. Have a great night, everyone.
We are party. Mwah. Ciao, baby.
No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want?